Just a few minutes tardy here. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm going to set my clock for myself. A little reminder not to go over because lunchtime is important. And I must confess, we've had quite a couple of weeks at home. So I did not achieve my full vision for what this session was in my head. But it is not hopefully going to be a waste of your time. Let me know if it is by just walking out the door and sending me some sign language or something on the way. But we're here to talk about improving the out-of-the-box experience for Drupal Commerce. So, do we have Drupal Commerce users or maybe Uber Cart users in the audience? Anybody that's done an e-commerce that you have a long time ago? Yeah? Was that Drupal 5 or Drupal 6? We actually still have some clients that are doing Drupal 6 Uber Cart. I don't think Andy's in here, but yeah. Every time I look at it, it feels like another world. Like, wow, did we actually work with this version of Drupal that didn't have an actual admin backend? I'm Ryan Szrama with Commerce Guys. A year and a half ago, we were able to separate ways from platform.sh and kind of reboot the core of Commerce Guys to refocus around this mission of engineering simpler solutions to the hardest parts of selling online. And so a lot of what we've been doing, of course, to achieve this mission is developing Commerce 2.x, because there are still hard problems, lo and behold, that need to be solved, especially when you consider international e-commerce, commerce systems embedded in content management systems, and so on and so forth. And kind of a lot of what I'll be showing even in this session as new features, new functionality that's now part of Commerce 2.x also qualifies as hard things. For example, secure credit card payment that uses tokenized APIs and then offers card on file functionality out of the box. We didn't do that in Commerce 1, but in order to improve the experience of Drupal Commerce out of the box now in Drupal 8, we do that out of the box, and probably spent months developing some of these features to make sure that it all just worked, only to find out after it was released that we didn't support some more basic things. So we've kind of swung the pendulum towards solving all the hard problems. Now we need to go back and make sure we covered all the rudimentary problems as well. But I won't belabor those points too much. What we're going to do is kind of go through just like the Drupal Commerce overview, and then I'm actually going to show side by side like what Drupal Commerce looked like on Drupal 7, what it looks like on Drupal 8, which may or may not look like a drastic difference when you see it on. It's still Bartik. I mean, it's not super exciting out of the box, but kind of explain what we've done, why we've done it, and where we're headed, and hopefully how it can make you more productive for your next e-commerce project. And so just a few quick words about why Drupal Commerce. Why do we still promote Drupal as an e-commerce platform instead of just saying, hey, go use Shopify and we'll stand up your WordPress site in a subdomain? You know, why even bother with this big complex set of modules? And I think it's these are just three of the reasons. Obviously, like the one that's not even mentioned here is actually people do still value open source software. We still value open source software, and there are a handful of open source e-commerce applications out there, none that are really like truly open source and embedded into a content management system like Drupal Commerce is. Even in the WordPress space, you're still nickel and dimed through all your plugin ecosystems and everything else besides. But still, like if you're trying to do robust content marketing, multimedia, product catalogs, things like that, you still need a content management system like Drupal. And of course, using Drupal Commerce means you just have one language that you have to speak as a developer to make everything work. You don't have to learn how to stand up WordPress alongside of a proprietary system or go learn Magento, because who wants to learn Magento? If you haven't tried, you should give it a shot sometime. Also, Drupal excels internationally and for multilingual, multi-currency, multi-site. Drupal does all of these things out of the box in a way that no other platform does right now. And so I think a lot of our early adoption, both in Drupal 7 and in Drupal 8, comes from Europe, because they have these needs to stand up a separate site or a separate domain for the same store for Sweden versus Denmark versus Finland, and have currencies managed properly, languages managed properly. And I don't even think with some of the bigger product information management systems, so these third-party tools that let you manage your product catalog, like most of them don't even have Drupal's level of multi-currency and multilingual support. So these are like SaaS products and big products that are built just to manage your product catalog. If you're in Europe, you're kind of hosed to connect these things to your sites. And then lastly, addressing the unique needs of different types of customers. For whatever reason, because Drupal has this robust roles system with permissions and access control modules and views that can show a different, completely different version of the site or product catalog to different types of users, we can hit some of these like multiple types of users, multiple workflow scenarios in ways that no other platform can. So if you're trying to think when or why would I use Drupal Commerce, anything that requires flexibility or multi-star, Drupal's still a great fit. And certainly anytime you're trying to do robust content marketing, digital marketing, end-to-end analytics, like all of that stuff is really simple to achieve in Drupal, whereas if you're using other strictly commerce platforms, you may or may not even have a CMS. Within Magento or Demandware or Hybris, you won't even have a CMS like Drupal or WordPress baked in. So we still believe it's important, and we still love to see what people do with it. This site that just launched, maybe 3 months ago, if you want to check that out, was one of the first Drupal 8 Commerce 2.x sites launched by a German agency called 1x Internet. So it's orlowatches.com. And their build time on the site was maybe like 1 or 2 months, and most of that was spent on theming. Because out of the box, they're getting everything that they needed to model their product, to build multiple checkout flows. The add to cart forms and everything are all working out of the box. And really, like a lot of what they had to do was just make it look sharp and fancy on the front end. And this same company actually has done projects in a matter of weeks. So for these other smaller projects, within 2 weeks, end to end, we had a whole online store custom built for our customers. And that kind of feedback has been really good for us to validate this idea that Drupal Commerce should do more out of the box than it did before. Because in Drupal 7, we really focused on this idea of creating a framework. These a loosely connected group of modules that, yes, all live in one project, but ideally could be used just mix and match to build the e-commerce site you want. And what we did was kind of swung the pendulum too far there toward not doing much out of the box at all. And did anybody ever use Commerce Kickstart 2.x? Maybe? Yeah, people saw it at least, probably demoed it. And that was us addressing this need for people to sort of have something that looked like a store. When people are evaluating e-commerce software, they want something that looks like this, not Bartik, right? And then to develop that distribution, we also created things like the entity reference field, the inline entity form, views mega row, and other user interface modules that made it easier to build stores with Drupal Commerce. And the drawback there was that Commerce Kickstart as a distribution wasn't a great starting point for building new projects unless that was what you needed. And so we're trying to find the middle ground. We'll probably screw it up again, and then once Drupal 9 comes around, we'll have a chance to fix it. But the idea is, what's the middle ground between doing more out of the box, looking like a store, functioning like the better e-commerce platforms out of the box, while still being a suitable framework for building custom e-commerce sites on. So again, we're trying to thread that line, and we did a lot of benchmarking against Magento, against Shopify, against BigCommerce, Illusion, basically all of the main SaaS tools out there. We also benchmarked against, like I said, Magento and Demandware and Hybris, these other proprietary e-commerce systems, to try to find what are the key things for us to nail from the start. And that's things like making sure that the inline entity form module is a dependency from the start. This is the module that lets you create a piece of, you could use it, what was the example back in the day? It used to be that if you had like a node reference field, and you wanted to reference, say, like an author profile from a book page, you could embed the form to create the author profile at the same time you're creating the book page. So the idea is that you're embedding inside one entity's form a whole other entity's form to create two entities at once. And that's how you create all of your different variations of a product, or your address for an order that sits on its own entity, all that kind of stuff. So we did build from scratch on D8. We tagged Commerce 2.x beta at Baltimore. We actually have the RC1 tagged now. I forgot to update that line. It didn't actually launch at the end of May, it launched at the end of June. But the RC1 is out. We just rolled that release. We haven't blogged it yet because Bojan just kind of sprinted for like 2 weeks straight and then took a vacation right as soon as he tagged it. So he's off enjoying the beach right now in Croatia. But the RC1 is there, and what that means from a project stability standpoint is that we believe the features that are there are the features that we will launch 2.0 with, but we want our users to say, hey, like this is broken. So we have full automated test coverage, but that doesn't mean that things aren't broken. It just means that your tests haven't found the bugs yet. Tests aren't great at finding bugs proactively, just making sure the same bugs you found before don't come back to bite you again. So we have that RC1 out there. We expect that our release candidate phase to last until DrupalCon Vienna, at which time we would tag the full 2.0 release. But as you've seen, people have been building sites on this, since last spring. I think we launched Sport Obermeyer at obermeyer.com alongside of Blue Spark, and I think we actually went public with that at DrupalCon Dublin last year. So that's all launched. Live sites have been going up for the last 6 months to a year, and now within the RC phase, hopefully we'll see more. And even whenever we put out the announcement, hey, the RC's been tagged, people started tweeting at us the stores that they've been building, which is pretty cool to see. Like there actually are live sites, we actually are getting traction here. So the big lessons that we've learned from Commerce 1 to Commerce 2, I've already kind of mentioned. It's prioritizing user experience from the start, providing more direction to developers and agencies. We had got more than a few companies basically say, hey, you can have this person for 3 months and do with them what you will. And so we would train them and kind of have them help us work through issues. Of course, Commerce Guys has our own affiliates that we deliver work through, Acromedia in Canada, Actualis in France, and they've both contributed developers who have been working full-time helping us on our contribs. The great example from Actualis was that with the RC1 release, we actually introduced a breaking change for payment gateways. The idea there being, because we aren't using rules right now, we don't have a rules dependency or any rules integration at all, we still wanted to have conditional availability of payment gateways. And that required a change in the data model for all of your payment gateway configuration, and it broke 20 payment gateway modules. And so before tagging the release, we updated all of the modules that we had access to, and then Actualis, this person came in for the other 14 payment gateway modules and patched them all to address the breaking change. And so having that kind of support from people that we've mentored and trained has been phenomenal this go around. And we're basically trying to avoid a situation we hit in Drupal 7 where it really was just Commerce Guy's team that was doing most of the contrib work, and just trying to make sure that more people are taking ownership of different parts of the ecosystem. So we might architect a module like Commerce Stock, but then Steve Oliver and his company, which I wish I knew what it was, he'll actually do the development, and we'll just give him that feedback as he works on it. And then we also incorporated more critical functionality into the core of Commerce itself. And I'm just going to go kind of quickly through here so we don't run out of time on the good stuff. Are any questions so far? Are you good on the whys, the purpose, where we're headed, all that? Okay. So one of the first things that we added to Commerce 2 that was not in Commerce 1 was the concept of a store. So previously, you basically had this global store configuration for any commerce site that you built. And this is things like contact information, maybe your default currency and things like that, that then was just sort of tucked away in random configuration variables. And if you ever wanted to export that to code, you had to use strongarm and variable exports and all that kind of stuff into your features. And it just made it difficult to do things like a multi-store instance where one Drupal site powered the Finnish versus the Swedish store with different default currencies in each one. And different product availability on each domain, all that kind of stuff. So we just introduced this new concept of a store entity so that every product and every order is now attached to a store or stores in the case of products. And they all have their own default currency, their own fulfillment addresses and everything, so that you can do one company fulfilling multiple sites through one code base, or a marketplace approach where you're like an Etsy style marketplace with everybody having their own store and their own payment PayPal payment email address connected through their store entity or something to that effect. And this was a big ongoing feature request in Commerce 1 that was never fully possible because we couldn't we didn't have configurable payment gateways per store, per user. So there's payment problems, multi-cart management problems, and other things like that in Commerce 1 that this now helps us overcome by assigning every order to a store, making products visible on a store-by-store basis, and so on and so forth. So that was one of the big things to land. And then the product architecture is again, largely the same. The big difference being that on your actual product edit form, the biggest difference is that we no longer use nodes, right, to create product pages because we didn't need to anymore. Instead, you have an actual product entity, so the URL would be product/1, product/2, etc., instead of node 1, node 2. And then we still have this same kind of reference field to product variations. And so you have your product entity, which is more or less a product page, and your product variation entities, which are your actual variations of a product, so whether it's sizes or colors or whatever else you might be segmenting these products on. You would then create your variations inline, and again, you're using the inline entity form module. And I kind of can't help but just go over to, oh man, I forgot the keynote doesn't like to alt tab out. But to go over to this, let's see if I can full screen it, Commerce 1.x site, because in Commerce 1.x I might have a node, that had a product reference field on it, and that product reference field would point to some product some product entity or entities that should be on this add to cart form. But the best I can do here out of the box was really just reference multiple SKUs. And so you had this multi-step process where you had to create all of your SKUs first, then go and create the page, and then link your SKUs into it after the fact to have an add to cart form that had more than one option on it. And of course, what happened with Commerce Kickstart 2.x was we then created the inline entity form module so that you could create your SKUs in line. But because it was always kind of in contrib space, it was never really fully supported throughout all of Commerce. And we fixed that now for Commerce 2.x so that if I'm editing a product, let's just go and edit this sucker. I have that inline entity form where I can create any number of variations, edit existing variations. If this was a more interesting product data model, there would be multiple fields in there that I could edit. I can, of course, add additional ones, and it will automatically give me the product select list and all that kind of stuff. And this is just using the inline entity form module, which I've even seen rumblings about people proposing maybe this should be a core module for Drupal 9, in the same way that our entity reference field is now core to Drupal 8, which would be pretty cool. I'd love to not have to maintain this anymore. It's actually really hard to get forms inside of forms in Drupal. It's always been really hard. I think it was maybe a little less hacky in Drupal 8, but in Drupal 7 it's some gnarly code if you ever wanted to blitz your brain. And so this is now kind of just core out of the box, and then of course we still have the same approach of embedding product variation fields inside of the product page. So you have the whole field system with your display formatters and display modes and all that kind of stuff. The nice thing about Drupal 8 is that in addition to view modes, you have form modes. Is that familiar to people? The idea that you might have different fields in a different order on one form versus another. So you do have a form mode here for your actual... wrong one. Let me close that one down. Oh, shoot. Because I full screened it. I didn't want to go back to it. So if I were to look at my product type page, we would have the ability to say what fields should appear on the add to cart form versus X other form. And really that is the only form that is a problem here. Within Commerce 1.x, we just had the one field system and all of these checkboxes. You had to know where they sat. So you'd have to go in and click a checkbox to say, this line item field should appear on the add to cart form, and then the prices should refresh whenever this value changes, and yada yada. But now it's all we're able to use more just native Drupal 8 concepts like different form displays, so that the variation form and the add to cart form are kind of all managed through that interface instead of trying to go through multiple different forms and configuration forms. Let's actually look at the product type as well. So you have managed form display on every entity type. And this would be like my product edit form. So if I wanted to change, what was visible, or create multiple form modes so that different types of users had different add to cart forms or different product edit forms, you can do that kind of stuff in Drupal 8 now. It's all exciting for us. Practically speaking, you won't use it on most projects, but the idea is we are trying to take better advantage of what Drupal 8 offers us out of the box. And with product attributes now, instead of depending on the field system again, because it's a lot cheaper in Drupal 8 to create new entity types, attributes and their options are their own entity types. So in Drupal 7, we kind of hacked around like using taxonomy to represent product attribute options. So you might have a vocabulary for sizes and then taxonomy terms for each of the sizes you want to sell. But then, of course, anybody could come in and delete a taxonomy term, and suddenly there goes your historical data model for all of the orders that have previously been purchased, because you can't recreate a taxonomy term with the same ID as the one you just deleted. So we really felt strongly about having attributes as an actual managed concept within Commerce 2.x. So now you have product attributes, you can come and create them all in line, and then to add them to different product types is really as simple as just checking boxes on the product type configuration form versus trying to work through the field config to add reference fields and check all the magic boxes and make sure it all worked properly. So this is really just, again, the form for creating attributes and creating our options. This is a product type form where I'm then checking boxes to add certain attribute types to this product type. And what it does is behind the scenes, if I were to check the color and size checkbox down there, it actually is creating these reference fields on my product type for me automatically, but it's just us like saying it's a lot easier for us to create a reference field based on this simpler form than it is for somebody else to have to work through that, especially as a non-native Drupal user. In addition to multiple attribute types, you also have multiple order types and then order item types. So no longer do we call them line items, they're order items, and that was really just part of our comparative research, like everybody's calling them order items, so we said we would too. These order items can reference any type of purchasable entity. And I don't know, do we have a mix of developers in here maybe? Folks that understand like object-oriented programming concepts. You have classes that are implementing interfaces, and one of the interfaces that we've defined for Drupal 8 Commerce is the concept of a purchasable entity. So you can create any kind of entity type that is purchasable, and so then we know that you can have an associated order item type that references this purchasable entity. That's kind of how it works in the code. But basically, just to say like you don't have to use products. I know that we have some sites right now that I think made like purchasable event ticket entities, right? So they don't have to use products if they don't want to. I can't remember all the current use cases that are out there in the wild. But the idea is that your line item type fields again are embeddable into the add to cart forms and all that kind of stuff. And you can have multiple order types. So if it's a B2B versus a B2C order, maybe they have different fields that have to be filled in. And each order type can have its own checkout workflow type, which I think we have a screenshot of. So that whereas on Commerce 1.x we had the one checkout form builder. So it's again global config. Where if I wanted to reorder elements on the checkout form, I would go to store, checkout settings, and I'd see the checkout form builder. Oh, my dev site is out of date. And I could just kind of really basically drag the checkout panes between checkout pages. And then there would be some configuration options as well. The challenge, of course, with this was always, well, what if you have multiple checkout flows? So, for example, I built a friend's site. I don't know if it's still up. We can see. Okay, bummer. I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe somebody screwed up their DNS. Wow, what is going on here? My friend is no longer with the company, so we won't blame him. Apparently, this site is no longer active. But the idea was it was a custom commerce site that had one checkout flow for customers who were trying to check out a phone through the website, and then another checkout flow for CSRs who were logged into the site as a customer service rep at one of their mall kiosks. And so at the kiosk, they'd be logging in from an iPad, and we wanted different checkout flows for them as the employee versus you as the consumer. And in order to make that happen, we had to hack around the fact that we only had that one checkout configuration. And in Commerce 1.x, even if I hid like elements from the actual form, so if I used a form alter to remove a checkout pane from a page, well, it would still try to validate and process the input because the validation of the form was interacting with the checkout the checkout configuration itself, not what was actually on the form and accessible to me as the user. So big problems. I mean, not huge problems. It maybe took me a few hours to work around, but that was only because I knew what to work around and what callbacks to override and what form alters to do. And so, we wanted to avoid that problem of, having to know the 3 form alters and 2 callbacks to override and everything to change. And so we have multiple checkout flows where you can just define which checkout panes you want. Is it a single page versus multi-step, which is the default? And then, edit the configuration so that, in the case of Sport Obermeyer, if you're checking out on site versus checking out as a VIP, like loyalty program member, you get different checkout flows each time. Or another great example, and then we'll see if this one will work for us. I happen to know they are still in business, is LivePerson. This is a live chat service that uses Commerce 2.x to sell subscriptions. And so if I'm just going to buy, a 2-person subscription, sure, why not? Whenever I hit buy, I'm going to go straight into their checkout flow. And did I actually click it? No. Full screen, it's kind of hard to see if it's loading or not. Right, so I can create my account, enter in my payment info, address, et cetera, and go through the whole checkout process. And then when I hit the end, they'll provision my LivePerson account for me and send me into the actual product itself. So this is all Commerce 2.x. It was a Drupal 7 site. We forward ported them into Commerce 2.x. I think we've been working on this site forever. It seems simple, but it's pretty complex because it's a lot of marketing stuff. So we had the default register page, which is just registering me for some random person, but then they also have different landing pages for different channels. So you could have a separate, entirely separate marketing page for Drupal users, and then maybe a coupon specific to Drupal users. What is that? Yeah, Drupal 10 PP. And then the hairy one is Shopify, because for Shopify, I don't even know if I can directly browse to this. The Shopify workflow is quite different. So yeah, totally. Yeah, how does this work? With Shopify, you basically typically would come in through the Shopify App Store. So if you already have a Shopify site, and you say, I want to use LivePerson on this site, they, from their App Store, will send you into an alternate checkout flow on the LivePerson site that just collects your payment, but then kicks you back to Shopify to finalize the authentication, and then run the billing through Shopify's own payment API. Because the way they work is they don't want you billing your customer directly. They want to bill them on your behalf and then keep 30% of whatever they collect, much like the App Store or something like that, the Apple App Store. And so, for them, they have 2 or more different checkout workflows based on the channel you're coming into, where they don't have to hack a single form and just make it accommodate everything. They just give you a different order type. Or are we familiar with the concept of resolvers? This is kind of a concept in Drupal 8 now. How would this work? In Drupal 7, let's say I wanted to have some kind of a plugin architecture. So if I'm trying to decide what checkout flow to use, I might just have a hook that says, hey, go find me the checkout plugin that I'm supposed to use for this order. And maybe it's just a single hook, and I have to weight my hooks lower than your hooks to make sure I get, to inject the checkout form first, right? That's the kind of basic way to do it is give me a stack of things and pick the first one that matches a set of, the conditions, and that becomes my checkout flow. And so, you could do that in Drupal 7 kind of by abusing module weights, or I often use for hook module implements alter, right, where you're literally rewriting the hook registry and, disabling other people's hooks and enabling my own. I don't know if anybody's done that. But in Drupal 8, we use a lot of resolvers that say, it's just a chain that says, find me the thing to use to handle this order. So there is a checkout workflow resolver, and you can write your own plugin for that to say, for this kind of order, use this checkout workflow. We have tax resolvers, store resolvers, if I want to figure out which store to create an order for, the shopping cart resolver to find out what the current user's shopping cart is. It's just one of the newish concepts within the whole object-oriented architecture of Drupal 8. So, for whatever that's worth. But I think on every one of our larger commerce projects, this checkout workflow stuff and order type stuff has paid off, every single time. I'm just trying to think of a project where we didn't use multiple checkout workflows. We have a Cane store, and I don't think we're going to use multiple checkout workflows for that one. But for any enterprise site, any more complex site, it's been great. And so yeah, we'll move on from there. We also, out of the box, wanted to make the checkout form look, again, more like an actual checkout form out of the box and not just a blob of field sets and everything. And kind of like the two main things that we found to do, at least at a core level, were one, to do the whole login or check out as a guest thing that is on every single e-commerce site nowadays, which was deceptively hard and ridiculously hard to do in Commerce 1. And I don't know why it never worked out. I think part of it was because I started to create the Commerce checkout login module and then I didn't finish it. And so everybody would try to use it and say, hey Ryan, why is your code broken? Sorry. But then nobody else finished it, which was weird. For 2 years, every now and then somebody would come in and put a patch out, but it would never get done. So I said, screw that, we're just going to make this part of the actual core system. So now, the first step would be login, where you either can log in as a returning customer or continue to check out as a guest. And this is same as Shopify, same as BigCommerce, same as whoever, nothing super complicated about it. But then we also went for the 2-column approach in the checkout form, where we have a persistent shopping cart showing on the top right-hand side. It's kind of like your running tally of what's being added to the order, whether that's taxes or shipping or whatever else. And this screenshot's a little bit out of date as well, because we also have coupon codes kind of beneath the order totals area now as well. And I'm just I might just kick over to the demo and just kind of run through that, because this is the kind of stuff that typically people would have to budget weeks for every project to go in and do. All these little just odds and ends to make it look and function more like a store out of the box. So just to kick over to the Commerce 2.x site here. If I go to my front end, so I'm looking at a view, let's see here, just a view of product entities. These product entities have single variations. Just going to add one to the cart, proceed to checkout. So that is now my cart. One of the things that Matt did for us in core was to have a nice little drop-down shopping cart block, although it doesn't have a checkout link in it right now because I didn't customize that. Also, we're on Bartik, so the theming looks like crap. Ideally, the labels wouldn't be 10 feet away from the actual values. But when I proceed to checkout, if I weren't logged in, which bummer I am, I would see that login form first. Since I am logged in, I'm going to go straight into the order information page. Notice I've already checked out once before, and since we basically treat card tokenization and card on file as the default, it's reselecting my last used payment method. If I chose to enter in a new credit card, of course, I'd have the credit card form and address form for that credit card. And then if anybody uses the card on file module in Drupal 7, this is basically what that is. You then have the user interface from your user account page to edit those cards that you have on file. We're using the fancy little icons once we detect what type of credit card it is and all that kind of stuff. I don't have a promotion on the site yet. Otherwise, we'd be able to see that there. Of course, I do have my South Carolina sales tax added for my CalMag. So I'm going to go work in my garden. And then when I continue to review, I'll just see the order details and again pay and complete my purchase and done. But the 2-column layout, card on file support, address book support, coupons and promotion support is all new in the core of Commerce. None of that was there in Commerce 1.x. And a lot of it was really, even to today, underdeveloped. Last year, we finally had a project that let us rewrite the address book module. And so now it actually is good for Drupal 7. But we're talking about 6 months after Drupal 8 had already launched. We finally had a really great address book module for Drupal 7. And so, a lot of stuff was just client-driven. Also, because of the whole Commerce guys, are we platform? Are we Drupal Commerce? What are we doing? Basically all of our margin and investment dollars went toward building platform.sh. And so Drupal Commerce was just suffering as a result of it. That's why I'm excited about not being tied to that anymore. Despite the fact that I love them and the product, we've been able to pay a lot more attention to Commerce. So if I were to, let's go ahead and complete and go to my account, we would see that I have the address book kind of baked into core, where I can edit my addresses, choose my default address, etc. Same for my stored payment methods. We're not calling it card on file because everyone else calls it stored payment methods, so that's what we have. So of course I could edit that. Well, really, you can't edit a stored one. The best you'd be able to do would be to update a billing address. Right now, you would just delete it and add a new one. So these are just some of the new functionality in core, and I'll come back to show the promotions in a sec because I think I was getting ahead of myself. We've already kind of talked about the payment changes. The biggest change in approach that we've made with respect to the actual integrated APIs is we're being a bit more choosy with who we've directly partnered with to make sure that they're integrated and up to date. But we designed the system around Braintree's payment system. I don't know if anybody familiar with Braintree and have you used them on a project before?
Not really.
They have this amazing system where you literally you put an HTML placeholder like a div or a span into your form, and you just give it a certain ID or whatever. And then there's JavaScript on the page that will turn each one of those things into an independent iframe that's tied to the same session on Braintree's server. So as you type in your credit card details and your expiration date and your CVV, they're storing that in the session on their server. But because it's just like individual iframes, you can move them around the page, theme them however you want to. You're not tied to just dropping in a whole payment form. You can literally integrate it natively into your form. And then whenever you go to hit submit on the form, they basically tokenize all that data, make sure it's a valid card, and then give you the token so that whenever you hit submit, it's actually just saving on your site the token that they've now given you. So it's really cool. It's basically like the most secure from a PCI standpoint way of doing things now. And they have some special designation even for how what level of compliance you have to achieve with these kinds of systems. So Braintree has this, Stripe has something similar, Authorize.net has something similar that we're currently trying to get them to fund us to integrate called Accept.js. And so we're really just trying to focus on those kinds of legit payment APIs. Maybe the most recent one I should have added to the slide is Square. So we just rolled out Square's payment gateway module. It's similar to Braintree. I think they have a $5,000 offer for new merchants. They get free processing on their first $5,000 of orders. And it's tied to the same POS terminal that you have in your store. So it's one account for everything. It's all pretty cool. So the last big thing to talk about is promotions in core. Anybody use the Commerce discount module or Commerce coupon in Drupal 7 you did yet? That again was kind of like the redheaded stepchild of Drupal Commerce on D7, and part of what happened there was we developed it for Commerce Kickstart 2.x, and that was all happening with our European team, while I was in the middle over here in the States of just trying to work on core and do events and help our consulting team in the States keep their stuff going well. And so there was a drop in oversight for how that got actually built, it was a neat concept, but it was maybe underdeveloped, is where I'll leave it. So it was Commerce discount, inline conditions, Commerce coupon, Commerce discount extra, all of these things together made up what was supposed to be a robust promotion system. And promotions is the language that everybody else uses, so we've adopted that. So we now have this core promotions entity that has offer types, so your BOGOs, your percentages off, your dollar amounts off of the order or of the product. And they're all working through a new adjustments API that we've added to Commerce 2.x. Instead of just depending on this big random array of price components, if you remember, now we actually have adjustments as an actual entity that we're attaching to orders. And so that the promotion can be enabled, disabled, have date ranges, maximum usage counts, and then conditions again for when and how that promotion should apply. And a lot of the work for that, and then a lot of work for other things like shipping, came from, again, sites like Interflora, which was built by a Danish company, Adapt AS. And they helped us fund and develop a lot of that functionality. Sport Overmeyer also, I think, was the reason we have the coupon functionality in the core now. And others have contributed as well. So if we go and look at Commerce 2.x, go back here to Chrome. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, because I always hate feeling like nobody can see anything. This is way too big though. There we go. So under Commerce we have the promotions menu. I don't have any defined yet, so I'll add one. The promotion form is going to look similar to the node form, the same two-column interface with your metadata on the right. So this is enabled. We created a custom widget here for your start versus your end dates. We'll go ahead and just not have an end date. We can do a limited number of uses for this promotion, so 10, why not? We have the concept of discount compatibility. That's actually broken in 1.x right now, and we're the University of Minnesota bookstore is funding us to fix it, which is great, because I've been wanting to be able to focus on it for a while. But we will add more types of compatibility here. But the idea is either any other promotion can be used alongside this one, or no other promotion can be used alongside of this one is the idea there. So that's the ability to have like exclusive discounts or mutually exclusive discounts. Either it's on clearance or you can use a 10% coupon, but you can't do both. So I'm just going to create a coupon. Why not? 10% off coupon. This will be a percentage off the order total. We're not mixing up decimals versus percentages like we did all over Commerce 1.x, just percentages. And then what we have here is kind of something that I think will become like a more generic part of Drupal, contrib ecosystem at some point in time. But the idea is that because rules isn't ready, and we didn't have time to contribute to it this time like we did last go around, and because we weren't sure that it actually was good for our users, we've created a kind of a pseudo rule system here where core has the concept of condition and action plugins, and so we've created a condition reference field. And then the condition reference field is formatted to look like this on the form, which is just a vertical tab set showing every potential condition that could apply to this promotion, and I can just kind of toggle them on or off, one by one. So, I could say this is a 10% discount that maybe is limited to just authenticated users or something like that. Although in this case it's a coupon, so I probably do that. We don't have like full summaries here yet. You can see it's really just showing whether or not something's enabled or not. But ideally, eventually, the summary will show what's been enabled. I'm just going to add a coupon to this one, so we're just going to call this 10 off, and we'll limit the number of uses. Well, the promotion itself is limited, so we don't really need to limit the coupon to, and save. So now, whenever I go to checkout, I'll have the same promotions block on the right-hand column of my checkout form and be able to add my coupon. Let's see if it's broken. 10 off. And so great. So now the adjustment's been applied to the order. This views area handler here is sort of queued up to show the adjustment, the subtotal, and then the adjustments in the order total as well. And it kind of actually works this time out of the box. And you can see that the user interface here is kind of, it's designed, the API supports, multiple coupon codes, but the primary use case is really one coupon per order, so we just have it formatted for one right now. I believe we'd have to look into this views area handler settings to toggle whether or not that should be, it's accepting one or multiple. Or maybe it's in the checkout pane configuration itself. But that's where that stands. And it's kind of, it's kind of hard to overstate like how much this needed to be fixed. And so why it was such an important thing for us to have in core. Obviously, all of these things resulted in a much longer development lifecycle. It's now been 3 years since we started Commerce 2.x. It did start with like a year of library development that kind of existed just in the PHP ecosystem as a whole, and then 2 years really of core, like actual Drupal module development. But now that we hit RC, we'll have a release by Vienna, and then what we'll be focusing on is continuing to flesh out things like adding more offer types. You saw there were only 3 offer types in there right now, even though we have like a dozen in Commerce 1.x. So adding more offer types, and then also focusing on ecosystem. So we kind of you have to get to a baseline of functionality before people can actually use you productively versus just going to Shopify because they don't have time to navigate a dozen different configuration forms. But then the next thing that causes people not to adopt a platform is integrations or the lack thereof. So Commerce guys will be focusing on ecosystem, like who are the right people to integrate with, from not just from a payment standpoint, that's easy, and there's always money and payment gateway integrations, but more like fulfillment and analytics and marketing tools, things that if you're actually running an e-commerce business, you need, and once you're at scale, you need a solid ERP connection or an order management system that's off-site, or a product information management system because that ties into your Amazon store and your eBay store and so on. So that's where we're headed, but obviously we got to get the 2.0 out first, and then we also have to get a nice demo. And so there is a kind of an in-build demo that Acromedia has been working on, my partner in Canada. And it basically is literally just Commerce 2.x out of the box, and then with some custom views and fancy, fake products. So they created this whole Drupal site that is just, vanilla Drupal 8, vanilla Drupal Commerce 2.x, and then some handsome theming. So, if we went through this whole checkout flow, it all looked pretty familiar against what I just showed you. Hey, we have a store-wide promotion that's going on, and then I'd be able to check out or log in, or check out as a guest or log in, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see that, just with a little bit of theming, it actually looks halfway decent if you're not just in Bartek. And that's what we're going for, is that ideally, you won't have to create a whole bunch of crap on the front end to just make a store work like you did with Commerce 1.x, where you didn't even have a user role that could access the checkout form by default, and people were always confused by that. But not swing so far that it's impossible to customize. And I think that the pluggability and the architecture of the architecture of Drupal 8 overall makes it a lot easier to get in there and really customize how the system works. And because we're at time, I don't have time for Q&A, but I'll hang out here as long as anybody wants. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy your lunch. And if you want to dig in and learn more, we have the newsletter where we actually resuscitated after a couple of years. So the newsletter has been going out bi-weekly just to give out updates and links to blog posts, and not just our posts, but what other people are doing with commerce. And then also case studies and live sites and things like that. So thanks for your time and attention.